My name is Clodagh and I'm a third year PhD student working in the Centre for Freshwater and Environmental Studies at DKIT. I started the environmental bioscience course in 2015, and that was after I finished a level 6 higher certificate in food science and management from TUD. But doing that course, I knew that it wasn't food science that I wanted to do at the end, but I really did enjoy the environmental modules that we did. So it was when I was 22, I reapplied through the CAO after sitting down with my dad one evening, and I looked at all the available environmental science courses, and I didn't really want to study in Dublin, but Dundalk, I'm from Dublin originally, and Dundalk is just up the road, and they had just launched this new environmental course the previous year. And I checked the course out and thought that it would be of interest to me, so I decided to put it down to CAO, and then I was accepted that August. What I really liked about DKIT, which I kind of took into consideration when I was doing my CAO application, was that there would be smaller classes. So with the smaller classes, you get more and like a better interaction with your lecturers, and then it gives you the chance to develop better relationships with your peers and your lecturers too, so you end up kind of learning more. But also in DKIT, there's so much going on with the clubs and societies and social events, and there's a lot of science outreach, as you mentioned, that goes on, and that's something that I spent a few years volunteering with the Cell Explorers, H2O Heroes, World of Pollinators workshops, where primary school children would come in during Science Week, or we'd go out to primary schools. Initially, I didn't actually think that I would be doing a PhD. It wasn't until I was in the final year of my degree where we had to do this final year project for the whole year. And it was then that I kind of fell in love with research, and I did really well at it. The project that I did was a DNA-based survey on Irish moth species. And yeah, the project was really hands-on. There was a lot of lab work involved, a lot of analysis on the computer using different software, and then the report was substantial afterwards. So while I was doing my final year research project, I had a conversation with one of my lecturers at the time who had gotten funding for the PhD that I'm currently working on. And she asked me if I would be interested in taking on a PhD. And although at the time I wasn't quite sure if I was capable of doing one, there were some fears, but I also was doing quite well in college. I was getting good grades and I was really excelling on my research project. So I kind of did have enough confidence to go ahead and apply for it. The research project is broadly on microplastic pollution in soils and terrestrial ecosystems. So microplastics are small, tiny plastic particles that are typically sized between 1 micron, which is 1,000th of a millimetre, and 5 millimetres in size. And you wouldn't really be able to see them with the human eye. You need a microscope to look at them, although you would probably be able to see the ones that are 5 millimetres if you have good enough eyesight. So microplastics can be manufactured intentionally and put into certain products like cosmetics. They're in your mascara, they're in facial scrubs, but a lot of microplastics are made, well, our clothes are made from synthetic microplastic fibres. But then you have other microplastics, which are secondary microplastics, and they are generated through the degradation of larger plastics over time, through like weathering, sunlight, wind, for example. And yeah, basically over time, the larger plastics break down into smaller plastics, which can make their ways into soils and then subsequently into waterways, and they could potentially be ingested by animals. But a lot of the research up to date has been done on microplastics in aquatic systems. We've read a lot about those in the news, microplastics in the ocean, but there's not a lot of research done on microplastic pollution on land. So that's what we're looking at here. But there have been a couple, or more than a couple, but some studies done globally that suggest that microplastics may be altering soil physical properties, that they may be disrupting microbial communities in the soil, and then that could have knock-on effects to the soil health and plant growth and nutrient cycling in the soils. So the PhD basically is structured into 4 main studies. So the first study, I looked at where are the sources of microplastics coming from in agricultural soils. So I sampled soils from 24 different fields, 6 fields that are used as permanent grasslands for cattle to graze, 6 fields that are used for the production of maize, which will be used to feed the cows, where they use plastic mulch films on the soil, 6 fields that are tillage fields, but they grow cereals like oats and wheat, and they don't need the plastic films over them. And then 6 fields that grow crops, energy crops mainly, where they use biosolids. And biosolids are a byproduct of the wastewater treatment process, basically whatever we flush down our toilets and our drains, and they're collected there, and they're spread on land and used as a fertilizer, which is great because they contain lots of natural sources of phosphorus and nitrogen, which are good for plant growth. But the downside to them is that whatever plastics we flush down the drains or from our clothes washing, they also get retained in the biosolids, which are spread on land. So the microplastics are getting into soils. So they were the fields that I looked at to see which type of farming practices are contributing to more microplastics in the environment. Then the second study that I started was a survey was conducted, and 430 farmers were surveyed, and basically that was to find out what types of plastics are used on Irish farms, how farmers are disposing of the plastics, and what are the barriers that farmers face. What are the barriers that farmers face when trying to recycle their plastics, farm plastics in Ireland. The survey also kind of looked at evaluating farmers' attitudes towards the environmental impacts of plastics, but also their knowledge about microplastics and plastic pollution. The third study, which I'm halfway through, is looking at the accumulation and the removal of microplastics through an integrated constructed wetland system in Glasslough in County Monaghan. And basically what this is it's a wetland where a lot of the wastewater from the people who live in the village, it will be treated through these ponds, and then the treated water flows out into the mountain river. But I'm looking at how many microplastics are coming into the system and staying there, and how many are leaving the system. And then the final study, which I just started, is a pot trial that I've set up in the polytunnel here in DKIT. And basically, I've set up over 100 pots where I'm adding different types and different amounts of microplastics to them, and I'm growing perennial ryegrass and white clover, and I'm seeing if the microplastics are having an effect on the soil physical properties, but also on plant growth